In a small forgotten town in Texas, a frail girl named Elena grew up in the shadows of a mansion that wasn't hers. Orphaned at the age of 6, she lived at the mercy of the wealthy Grayson family, who promised the orphanage that they would raise her like their own daughter. But promises mean nothing to people who see others as dust beneath their shoes. From the very first night, Lena realized she was not a daughter in this grand house. She was a servant. She was forced to scrub floors until her tiny fingers bled, to serve food she wasn't allowed to taste, and to sleep in the cold attic with rats for company. The Grayson children, Clara and James, mocked her endlessly. "You're nothing but a charity case," Clara would sneer, wearing dresses worth more than Lena's entire existence. Their mother, Mrs. Eleanor Grayson, ensured Lena knew her place. "You should be grateful, child. Without us, you'd be starving on the streets. Remember that before you ever complain." And their father, Mr. Richard Grayson, was the cruelest of them all. A wealthy oil tycoon, he carried himself like a king, and in his world, orphans like Lena were less than insects. Years passed, but Lena's suffering only grew worse. She worked like a maid, endured humiliation like a criminal, and often went hungry while the Graysons feasted at the grand dining table. Every night, in the attic's darkness, she whispered to herself, one day I'll rise. One day, they'll bow to me." But fate struck its final blow when Lena turned 16. She had grown into a beautiful young woman, despite her hardships. A rare sparkle lit her eyes, and her presence began to draw attention from outsiders. At a business gathering in the mansion, one of Mr. Grayson's wealthy associates noticed her and remarked, "That girl, she has the charm of a queen." That single sentence sealed Lena's fate. The Graysons could not tolerate the idea of their servant girl shining brighter than their own spoiled daughter. That night, they plotted her destruction. On a stormy evening, Richard Grayson dragged Lena out to the woods under the excuse of sending her back to the orphanage. But instead, they beat her mercilessly and left her half dead in the rain, whispering cruel words before driving away. This is what happens when dirt forgets its place. Broken, bleeding, and abandoned, Lena should have died that night. But she didn't. A passing stranger, an elderly woman known as Madame Vieira, a reclusive fortune-teller, found her. She nursed Lena back to life and gave her a roof, food, and more importantly, wisdom. Under Madame Vieira's care, Lena learned resilience, strategy, and the art of reading people's hearts. "You don't need wealth or family to conquer them," Vera whispered. "You need patience, and the strength to let your pain become your power." Years passed. Lena disappeared from the world, presumed dead by the Graysons. Meanwhile, whispers of a mysterious young woman rising in business circles began to spread. By the time Lena was 24, she had transformed into Elena Vieira, a name that commanded respect and fear. She had wealth, connections, and influence. She was no longer the orphan girl who scrubbed floors. She was the woman who owned boardrooms, the woman whose beauty and power made men stutter, and the woman who carried a storm in her eyes. And one cold winter night, invitations arrived at the Grayson mansion. A new business partner wished to collaborate with Richard Grayson's empire. The name on the golden envelope? Elena Vieira. The Grayson mansion was decorated in golden lights that winter night. A lavish dinner was hosted in honor of their mysterious new business partner. Richard Grayson stood tall, confident as ever, unaware that the ghost of his sins was about to walk through his doors. "Elena Vieira," the butler announced. All eyes turned as Lena, now Elena, walked in, dressed in a deep emerald gown that shimmered under the chandelier. Her presence was magnetic, her beauty regal, and her silence powerful enough to command respect. Richard's jaw tightened. Eleanor's glass nearly slipped from her hand. Clara and James exchanged confused glances. The face before them looked hauntingly familiar, but they couldn't believe what their eyes were showing them. Elena smiled, graceful and calm. "Mr. Grayson, thank you for inviting me." Richard forced a smile, trying to regain composure. "Of course, Miss Vera. It's an honor to have such a successful young woman as our guest." Their handshake lingered for just a moment longer than it should have. Elena's eyes pierced through Richard's soul. He felt a chill crawl down his spine, as if she knew everything about him. During dinner, Elena spoke little, but every word was precise. She praised the mansion's architecture, complimented Clara's dress, and even toasted to the Grayson family's success. But beneath her elegance was a hidden sharpness. Every compliment was laced with venom that only she understood. "So, Miss Vera," Eleanor asked, trying to mask her nervousness, "what brings you to Texas? Your name has been echoing in many business circles." Elena sipped her wine before answering. "What brings me here? Justice? Though, in business terms, let's just call it opportunity." Richard chuckled stiffly. "I like the way you think." Elena's eyes flickered toward him, cold and unforgiving. "I doubt you do." Silence fell across the table for a brief moment. Clara shifted uncomfortably. James cleared his throat, but Elena smiled sweetly and continued eating, as if nothing happened. Over the next few weeks, Elena embedded herself into the Grayson family's world. She proposed joint ventures, attended board meetings, and slowly gained control over key business assets. Richard, blinded by greed, welcomed her influence, ignoring the strange unease he felt in her presence. Eleanor, however, wasn't so easily fooled. Late one night, she whispered to Richard, "There's something about her. Something dangerous. That girl's eyes. They remind me of someone." Richard dismissed her. "She's just another investor. Don't let your paranoia ruin this opportunity." But Eleanor was right. Elena began her revenge quietly. She didn't strike with knives or poison. She struck with patience and intellect. She exposed James's gambling addiction to the wrong crowd, leading him into heavy debt. She befriended Clara's closest friend, only to reveal Clara's darkest secrets at a charity gala, humiliating her publicly. And Richard's empire? Slowly, Elena redirected contracts, manipulated shareholders, and turned loyal allies against him. Within months, the Graysons' world began to crumble, and yet they had no proof it was her. One evening, as Clara wept in her bedroom over a broken engagement, an engagement Elena herself had orchestrated to collapse, Eleanor stormed into Elena's hotel suite. "Who are you, really?" Eleanor demanded, her voice trembling. Elena turned slowly from the mirror where she had been adjusting her diamond necklace. Her reflection glared back like a queen preparing for war. "Who am I?" she whispered, stepping closer. "I am the shadow you tried to bury, the child you left to die in the rain." Eleanor's face went pale. Her lips quivered. "No, it can't be. You, Lena?" Elena's smile was razor sharp. "Not Lena anymore. That girl died in the woods years ago. I am Elena Vieira now, and I've come for everything you value most." Eleanor staggered back, tears filling her eyes. "Richard must never know." "Oh, but he will," Elena interrupted coldly. "Every single one of you will watch as your empire burns, as your family falls apart. And when you're left with nothing, then you'll remember the orphan girl you thought was beneath you." Eleanor collapsed into a chair, trembling. For the first time in her life, the queen of the Grayson mansion felt powerless. "And Elena?" She walked out of the room with grace, her heels clicking like war drums, her vengeance far from over. Weeks passed, and the Grayson Empire bled from wounds invisible to the world, but carefully inflicted by Elena. Richard sat in his study late at night, staring at piles of reports. Contracts canceled, investors backing out, stocks plunging. He slammed the papers onto his desk, veins popping on his forehead. "This doesn't make sense. Who could be behind this?" A voice from the doorway answered calmly. "Perhaps it's karma, Mr. Grayson." Richard turned sharply. Elena stood there, her emerald eyes glowing with quiet rage. She stepped into the room like a storm wrapped in silk. Richard forced a laugh, masking his unease. "Miss Vera, if you've come to gloat, this isn't the time." Elena moved closer, each step echoing like a countdown. "Oh, but it is. You see, Richard, I've waited years for this moment." Richard frowned, his hand tightening around his glass of whiskey. "Waited? For what?" Elena's smile was cold. "For you to remember the girl you left to die." Richard's face drained of color. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered onto the carpet. "No," he whispered. "Impossible." "Lena," she said softly, her voice like a blade across his throat. The orphan you and Eleanor discarded like trash. The child you betrayed. Richard stumbled back, his arrogance collapsing. We had no choice. You weren't one of us. Eleanor insisted. Elena cut him off, her fury finally unmasked. Don't you dare blame her alone. You both watched me suffer. You both turned your backs while the rain swallowed me whole. And now you'll watch as I take everything that made you feel powerful. She dropped a folder onto his desk. Inside were documents showing complete takeover of his assets, board signatures siding with her, and proof of his offshore scandals prepared for exposure. Richard's hands shook as he flipped through the pages. You can't do this. Elena leaned in, her lips inches from his ear. I already have. Just then, Eleanor burst into the study, her silk robe trailing behind her. She had overheard everything. Lena, please, she cried, rushing forward. Don't destroy us. Take the money, take the house, take whatever you want, but don't destroy the family. Elena turned toward her slowly, her face carved from ice. Family? Her laugh was hollow. You don't get to say that word. You taught me what family means. Betrayal, cruelty, abandonment. Now you'll taste it yourselves. Eleanor dropped to her knees, sobbing. Clara appeared at the doorway, confused and terrified, witnessing her mother beg. Who is she? Clara whispered. Elena looked at her, eyes softening for just a second. I was supposed to be your sister. Clara gasped, hand over her mouth. No, that can't be true. But Eleanor's silence confirmed it. Clara staggered back in disbelief, her world collapsing. Richard tried one last time to regain control. Listen to me, Lena. This path, you'll ruin yourself too. Revenge never leaves anyone whole. Elena's expression darkened. I was ruined the day you left me. What I'm doing now, this is justice. She turned to leave, but before walking out, she dropped one final bombshell. By sunrise, the world will know who you really are, Richard. Your empire, your reputation, your pride, it all burns tonight. And with that, she disappeared into the night, leaving behind a broken family and an empire on the edge of collapse. Hours later, the news exploded across every channel. Grayson scandal, billionaire exposed for corruption, betrayal, and family secrets. The Grayson name was ruined. James fled the country to escape his debts. Clara cut ties with her parents, unable to forgive their lies. And Richard? He sat in his study, staring blankly at the walls as reporters surrounded his gates. Eleanor, broken and hollow, whispered the same words over and over. She came back. She came back. Meanwhile, Elena stood atop a hill overlooking the mansion. The lights inside flickered as if the house itself was suffocating under the weight of truth. She closed her eyes, the cold wind brushing her face. For the first time in years, she felt free. But freedom didn't erase the scars. And though her revenge was complete, her heart whispered a haunting question. When revenge takes everything, what remains? Weeks turned into months. The Grayson empire was no more. Newspapers still whispered about the scandal, documentaries were planned, and social circles spat out the Grayson name like poison. But for Elena, silence became her closest companion. She moved into a quiet estate far from the city. At night, she'd walk along the lake, her reflection staring back at her. A woman victorious, but hollow. One evening, as the sun melted into crimson skies, Clara appeared at her doorstep. Her once innocent eyes were now shadows of betrayal and confusion. Elena hesitated but let her in. Why? Clara's voice trembled. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you destroy them like this? Elena poured her tea calmly, her hands steady though her heart wavered. Because the truth wasn't yours to bear, Clara. It was theirs, and they buried it until I dug it out with fire. Clara's tears spilled. You could have taken me away with you. You could have let me be your sister. Elena looked into her eyes, the only innocent soul in this entire story. I couldn't risk turning you into them. You deserve to grow without poison. Clara's lips trembled. And now? What about now? Elena's silence was heavier than any words. For the first time, her armor cracked, She reached out, brushing Clara's cheek. Now, you get to decide whether you'll hate me or forgive me. Clara pulled away, confusion warring with love. I don't know, she whispered, before walking out into the night. Elena watched her go, her chest aching with a pain revenge couldn't heal. Days later, Eleanor sent a letter. The once proud matriarch wrote with shaky hands, her words drenched in sorrow. You've won, Lena. We are nothing. Richard barely speaks. James is gone, and Clara no longer trusts me. But I beg you, don't let the hatred consume you as it did us. You're stronger than we ever were. Be free. Elena read the letter under a dim lamp, her jaw clenched. For years, she had dreamed of this moment. Their downfall, their begging, her triumph. Yet all she felt was emptiness. Revenge had given her justice, but justice was not the same as peace. That night, she stood once again on the hill overlooking the Grayson mansion, its windows dark, its gardens overgrown. A once mighty empire reduced to ruins. She whispered into the wind, I won. But at what cost? The wind carried her words into the night, scattering them like ashes. And as the moon rose, Elena walked away. Not as a victim, not as a villain, but as something in between. A woman who had burned the past to ashes, and now had to face the haunting silence of her own victory. For in the end, revenge gave her everything she wanted, except the one thing she truly needed, peace.